John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Jacqueline Bouvier. Kennedy built a public marriage that intertwined family, diplomacy, and the ceremonial life of the White House. Kennedy's siblings formed a tight political network, and Jacqueline's background in literature and the arts shaped her role as First Lady. Their partnership emphasized cultural statecraft, with carefully staged visits and a restoration of White House interiors that linked national identity to history and design. Kennedy's presidency defined early Cold War policy and domestic aspiration, while Jacqueline fostered an image of grace that resonated with a broad public. The assassination in Dallas in November of 1963 ended the presidency and triggered an unprecedented period of mourning. Jacqueline made decisive choices about the funeral rites, drawing on historical models to convey dignity and continuity. The immediate burial took place at Arlington National Cemetery, selected for its national symbolism and proximity to the Capitol. Within days, the site evolved from a provisional grave into the nucleus of a permanent memorial. The Eternal Flame, conceived with Jacqueline's input and implemented by the Army Corps of Engineers, introduced a continuous visual marker that distinguished the plot within a military landscape. Public visitations surged, and the initial grave could not safely or practically accommodate the flow of mourners. The family, federal agencies, and designers coordinated a move within Arlington to a formally designed terrace on a hillside, where the Eternal Flame was incorporated into a broad granite platform. This relocation, completed not long after the funeral period, created a permanent ensemble aligned with processional approaches and managed viewing lines. The design balanced solemn access with preservation of the grounds, and it introduced a high-security perimeter within a cemetery that otherwise functions as an open national shrine. Kennedy's brother, Senator Robert Francis Kennedy, and later Senator Edward Moore Kennedy, were interred in related areas, reinforcing a sense of family presence at Arlington. Jacqueline married Aristotle Onassis in the late 1960s and later concluded her public life in New York publishing. Her death in the mid-1990s prompted interment beside Kennedy at the Memorial Terrace, a placement that closed the narrative established in 1963. The couple's children, Caroline and John, were central figures in public remembrance, and family attendance at commemorations maintained the site's living connection to its history. The burial ensemble sits on a gently rising slope that frames the Eternal Flame against a field of headstones, creating a visual interplay between individual memorialization and national military service. Access follows defined paths, with guard presence and crowd control that distinguish the experience from typical cemetery visitation. Stone paving, low walls, and inscriptions articulate the space in measured tones rather than grand rhetoric. The Eternal Flame's fuel and ignition systems have been updated over time to ensure continuity, underscoring the site's status as a functioning memorial rather than a static monument. This arrangement produces an unusual condition: a presidential grave inside a public military cemetery that functions like a curated memorial precinct. The move from the initial burial to the designed terrace reflects a rapid translation of public mourning into permanent landscape architecture. In a setting defined by uniform markers and orderly sections, the Eternal Flame creates a singular focal point, while security protocols and controlled approaches keep the experience orderly and restrained. The result is a carefully managed space where national ritual, family memory, and cemetery tradition meet in one consistent frame. Ronald Wilson Reagan and Nancy Davis Reagan formed a partnership grounded in shared professional experience and disciplined public presentation. Both came from Hollywood into political life, bringing a practiced sense of timing and message. Reagan's tenure as California governor shaped his national profile, and his presidential years emphasized economic policy, defense posture, and communication strategy. Nancy focused on scheduling, personal counsel, and initiatives on substance awareness, while also managing social diplomacy that defined the White House's ceremonial tone. Their marriage functioned as a visible axis for the administration's image and continuity. Reagan's late life brought health challenges that he addressed with a public letter acknowledging his diagnosis, a document that established a clear, dignified frame for his retirement. Nancy's advocacy increased during these years, concentrating on research and care networks while maintaining the couple's public presence with restraint. The family, foundation, and library staff coordinated protocols that preserved privacy without breaking the connection to supporters and researchers. This balance mirrored their earlier approach to public life, measured and tightly organized. The Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, occupies a high hillside with long views over the valley, an environment that translates the presidential archive into landscape. Interment occurs on a terrace near the museum complex, integrating the grave with the institution that preserves the papers, artifacts, and exhibit narratives. Controlled entry, defined hours, and staff presence shape the visitor experience, which proceeds from galleries to an exterior memorial court. The setting is open to the sky yet enclosed by the campus, a combination that feels ceremonial without replicating a traditional public cemetery. Reagan died in the early 2000s and was buried on the library grounds following a state funeral sequence that concluded in California. Nancy joined him more than a decade later, with arrangements that followed established plans on the same terrace. The inscriptions are concise, the materials are durable stone, and the composition emphasizes horizon and order. Landscaping directs approach along gentle paths, and low walls set a perimeter that maintains decorum. The site's position on the hillside creates an immediate sense of prospect, while the library's security defines the boundaries of access. This arrangement illustrates a modern presidential memorial pattern, a grave paired with an archive that hosts ceremonies, academic research, and civic education. The library setting concentrates memory within a curated environment, distinct from the rhythms of a public cemetery. For visitors, the experience is sequential, moving from documentary exhibits to a final outdoor space that concludes the narrative. The result is a private campus where the couple's public legacy, domestic partnership, and memorial resting place are integrated into one controlled and comprehensible landscape. Richard Milhouse Nixon and Thelma Catherine Pat Nixon built a marriage shaped by shared effort, political endurance, and a careful division of public roles. Nixon's early career in law and Congress placed the couple in the national arena, where Pat balanced family responsibilities with campaign travel and public appearances. Their partnership weathered victories and defeats, from vice presidential prominence to the narrow presidential loss in the early 1960s, and then to a return that defined late Cold War diplomacy. Pat's public image emphasized steadiness and hospitality, reinforcing the administration's focus on order and international engagement. Nixon's presidency delivered consequential foreign policy moves, including strategic arms talks and a breakthrough opening to China, alongside domestic reorganization and environmental measures. Pat advanced cultural and diplomatic outreach, adding public events and international travel that supplemented formal statecraft. The administration's achievements were overshadowed by legal and political crises that culminated in resignation in the mid-1970s, placing the couple under intense scrutiny. Post-presidency, they maintained a structured public life centered on writing, charitable activity, and the development of the Presidential Library. The Nixon Library and Birthplace in Yorba Linda combines a museum, archives, gardens, and the preserved family home, producing a campus that locates memory within the environment of origin. The couple's burial sites lie in the landscaped courtyard near the house where Nixon was born, a deliberate placement that links beginnings, public service, and final rest. The setting is privately administered, with defined visiting hours, staff oversight, and a visitor sequence that moves from exhibits to outdoor reflection. The environment reads as a curated memorial rather than a conventional cemetery landscape, with pathways, plantings, and signage guiding circulation. Pat died in the early 1990s and was interred at the library, establishing the family plot on the campus. Nixon died soon after and was placed beside her, following national observances that concluded at Yorba Linda. The graves are marked by modest flat stones within a framed garden, with inscriptions that emphasize dates and service rather than elaborate iconography. The proximity to the birthplace house adds a domestic scale to the memorial, contrasting with the formality of a national cemetery. Security and decorum are maintained through campus rules that shape respectful visitation. The arrangement exemplifies a presidential memorial model that unites archive, museum, and burial within a single, privately managed site. For researchers and visitors, the experience is linear and organized, beginning with documents and exhibits and concluding at a quiet garden. The couple's resting place, situated steps from the preserved home, underscores a narrative of return and origin. In contrast to public cemetery norms, the library campus offers a controlled environment that keeps focus on recorded history, institutional stewardship, and the measured remembrance of a contested but pivotal public life. George Herbert Walker Bush and Barbara Pierce Bush formed a partnership that spanned wartime service, diplomatic posts, and the presidency, grounded in a large family network and long-standing civic commitments. Bush's career moved through Congress, party leadership, intelligence service, and vice presidency before the presidency, while Barbara established a public role centered on literacy initiatives and community engagement. Their marriage provided continuity through frequent relocations and changing responsibilities, with family gatherings and philanthropic work reinforcing a sense of steadiness. The administration managed shifting global currents at the end of the Cold War, with coalition building and diplomatic coordination as defining features. Barbara's literacy advocacy grew into a foundation that supported programs nationwide, reflecting her practical approach to public service. In retirement, the couple remained visible in philanthropic circles and at public events, maintaining connections to Texas and to institutions that preserve the documentary record of their years in office. Their public image emphasized service and civility, supported by a family presence that included a future president and a governor. Barbara died in the late 20-teens and was interred at the Bush Presidential Library in College Station, establishing the family plot within a walled garden adjacent to the museum complex. George died later that year and was placed beside her, following ceremonies that included transport by rail and coordinated observances in Texas. Their daughter Robin, who died in childhood, had already been memorialized within the same garden, making the site a focal point for family remembrance. The garden design uses water, lawn, and low shrubs to frame the graves, with pathways that guide visitors through a quiet, enclosed space. The library sits on the campus of Texas A&M University, and the burial garden lies within secured grounds that balance public access with institutional stewardship. Visitors pass through the museum sequence before reaching the memorial area, where signage and staff oversight maintain decorum. The enclosure establishes a sense of seclusion within an academic setting, and materials are restrained with stone markers and simple inscriptions. The spatial arrangement integrates archive, museum, and graves into a single narrative route, from documents and exhibits to a contemplative garden. This configuration reflects a modern presidential memorial approach in which burial, scholarship, and civic education are co-located. The secured garden is not a conventional public cemetery, yet it remains publicly accessible within defined hours, producing a measured and respectful experience. The presence of Robin's memorial within the plot adds a family dimension that is rare at presidential sites, anchoring the couple's public legacy to a personal story. In the context of a university campus, the garden creates a calm precinct where institutional memory and family remembrance meet in a carefully maintained landscape. Paul Leonard Newman and Joanne Gignilliat, Tremere Woodward, built a long marriage that paralleled sustained careers in film and theater. Newman's emergence as a leading actor coincided with Woodward's Academy recognition, and their partnership extended to producing, directing, and stage work. The couple raised a blended family, balanced professional schedules with domestic life in Connecticut, and invested time in training programs that supported performers and crew. Friends and collaborators often noted the regularity and discipline that framed their household and work. Public contributions ranged from Newman's philanthropic enterprise in food products to the creation of camps for seriously ill children, funded through a model that directed profits to charity. Woodward served as a central figure in these efforts while continuing acting and mentoring. The couple financed medical and educational programs and supported regional theater in their home state. Their public image reflected privacy and purpose, without the trappings of celebrity tourism. Interviews and profiles emphasized craft, philanthropy, and a quiet daily routine in the Northeast. Decline arrived through health challenges that were handled privately, with infrequent public updates and careful boundary setting. Newman died in the late 2000s after a period of illness. Woodward, who faced cognitive decline in later years, reduced public appearances and remained under close family care in Connecticut. The family managed information sparingly, consistent with long-standing preferences for discretion and limited media engagement. Statements were concise and focused on thanks to supporters and on the continuity of charitable programs. Burial arrangements for both have been widely reported as undisclosed in Connecticut, with no confirmed public site. Contemporary accounts describe private interment or cremation under family control, and local speculation has never yielded a verified, accessible location. The absence of a public grave has kept mourners from establishing routines of visitation or memorabilia placement. Memorial observances have centered on institutions the couple supported, including the Camp Network and regional arts organizations, rather than at a cemetery or mausoleum. This outcome reflects deliberate design, For two of the most recognizable spouses in American film, the final resting arrangements emphasize family privacy over public commemoration. The choice has shifted remembrance to ongoing philanthropic work, where documents, programs, and beneficiaries stand in for a headstone or crypt. In the history of celebrity burials, the couple represents a clear case of intentional obscurity, aligning end-of-life decisions with a lifetime of modest public presentation and a preference for tangible civic impact over a fixed memorial site. Ishur Danielovich, known professionally as Kirk Douglas, and Ann Bidens maintained a long marriage that blended film production, philanthropy, and family life. Douglas rose from stage work to leading roles in post-war Hollywood, then expanded into producing, where he exercised unusual control over projects and creative teams. Bidens brought multilingual skill and experience in European film publicity, guiding schedules, contracts, and social diplomacy. Their household included children from earlier and shared relationships, with the couple coordinating careers while sustaining a network of artistic and charitable ties in Los Angeles. Douglas became a prominent figure in the industry's transition from studio dominance to artist-driven production. He supported independent directors, backed projects with historical or ethical themes, and used his leverage to credit blacklisted writers, a decision that affected public debates about authorship and responsibility in the film community. Bidens co-managed philanthropic initiatives in healthcare, education, and the arts, shaped by practical oversight rather than naming campaigns. Together, they established scholarship funds, supported hospital programs, and invested in community institutions across the city. In later years, Douglas experienced significant health challenges, including recovery after a plane crash and a stroke that altered his public presence but not his routine of appearances and charitable activity. Bidens continued to coordinate events and oversee donations, keeping the couple's commitments active. Douglas died at an advanced age in the early 2020s, and Bidens followed soon after. Family announcements emphasized gratitude and continuity of philanthropic work, framing a steady conclusion to a long public life. Both are interred at Westwood Village Memorial Park, a small cemetery set within commercial blocks of West Los Angeles. The grounds are compact, bordered by office buildings and parking areas, which mute street awareness and keep the interior quiet. Many notable graves lie within interior mausoleum corridors or along narrow lawns that are easy to overlook without a map. The couple's placement reflects the cemetery's character, discreet and modest in scale, with signage that encourages decorum and limits photography inside certain structures. Westwood's footprint makes the site effectively hidden in plain sight, a paradox for a pair whose names are central to film history. Visitors reach the cemetery through a short driveway, then move among close-set markers and mausoleum niches rather than broad ceremonial avenues. The result is a contemplative, almost residential environment. In this setting, the Douglas and Bidens memorials sit among peers from classic and modern Hollywood, integrated into a landscape where fame is present but visually restrained, and where archival interest is served by a quietly maintained civic space. Nathan Birnbaum, known as George Burns, and Grace Ethel Cecile Rosalie Allen formed a professional and personal partnership that traversed vaudeville, radio, film, and television. Burns crafted timing and structure, while Allen developed a distinctive comic persona that anchored their acts. The couple's working marriage relied on careful script construction, rehearsal discipline, and a close circle of writers and collaborators. Offstage, they maintained a tight domestic network of friends and colleagues, with Burns managing business affairs and Allen stepping back from public life in later years. Their contributions shaped American broadcast entertainment during its formative decades. The Burns and Allen radio show set patterns for character-driven comedy, while the television series refined the interplay between staged performance and audience address. Burns adapted to changing media without abandoning an economy of setup and payoff that defined his style. Allen's departure from performance, followed by her death in the mid-1960s, closed the original duo chapter. Burns continued with film and live appearances, earning late career recognition that affirmed continuity between vaudeville craft and modern formats. Decline took familiar forms. Allen faced health issues that limited activity before her death, and Burns managed grief by preserving the professional routine, including memoir writing and controlled public appearances. Burns lived to advanced age, sustained by a small team and a predictable schedule that kept him connected to audiences. Family and colleagues coordinated care and communication, ensuring accuracy in announcements and maintaining decorum around private observances. The couple's public narrative settled into a clear arc, from stage partnership to individual continuation. Both are entombed at Forest Lawn, Glendale, within interior mausoleum spaces that function as controlled, semi-private memorials. The cemetery presents a park-like exterior, with chapels and gardens, but many notable interments lie behind doors where decorum rules apply, and where photography and access are limited. Visitors reach the mausoleum through supervised entries or during posted hours, then navigate corridors and alcoves that mute the sense of open landscape. The placement renders the couple's resting place effectively hidden in plain sight, accessible yet insulated from casual sightseeing. The interior setting matches a legacy built on precision and rehearsal rather than spectacle. Markers are restrained, inscriptions are concise, and the environment is designed for quiet passage rather than extended gathering. Staff oversight preserves order, and wayfinding remains subdued, which keeps focus on remembrance rather than display. In a cemetery associated with celebrity history, the Burns and Allen entombments demonstrate how institutional design, interior architecture, and controlled access can shape a modest, yet respectful experience that aligns with the couple's measured public image. Leonard Franklin Sly, known as Roy Rogers, and Frances Octavia Smith, known as Dale Evans, built a partnership that joined Western-themed entertainment with family-centered public life. Both emerged from music and radio into film and television, where singing cowboy narratives set a template for mid-century popular culture. Their marriage integrated work and home, with appearances, recordings, and public events organized around a shared brand that emphasized approachability and values shaped by faith and community. The couple raised a blended family and maintained close ties to collaborators who supported touring and production schedules. Rogers and Evans contributed to the spread of country and Western imagery across film, television, and merchandising. Their television program reinforced a wholesome vision of frontier life adapted for suburban audiences, while charity appearances linked celebrity to local institutions. Evans wrote and recorded songs that carried themes of perseverance and consolation, and she published works that connected personal experience to public service. The combination of music, narrative, and outreach built a durable audience beyond the film era, sustaining relevance as formats changed. In later years, the couple reduced travel and focused on regional engagements in the high desert of Southern California. Health concerns and age shaped a gradual decline, with carefully managed public updates and a steady presence at community events. Rogers died in the late 1990s, and Evans continued appearances for several years, maintaining charitable links and honoring the duo's history. Family members coordinated communications and memorial activities, keeping attention on local ties and long-standing causes rather than on large public ceremonies. Both are interred at Sunset Hills Memorial Park in Apple Valley, a cemetery set apart from the usual celebrity circuits of Los Angeles. The site incorporates museum-like elements and themed memorials, including displays connected to the couple's careers, yet the overall setting remains quiet and community-oriented. Visitors reach the grounds by local roads that run through residential and desert landscapes, a route that underscores distance from the dense entertainment districts where many contemporaries are buried. The cemetery's administration maintains decorum while allowing thoughtful access to the couple's memorials. The Apple Valley placement reflects the couple's association with the region and a preference for a setting that matches their public identity, practical and community-based. Markers and monuments are legible without excess, and surrounding features guide visitors through a narrative that balances memorabilia with sober remembrance. The location, off the main tourist path, keeps the experience measured and local in tone. In an era when many entertainment figures rest in large urban cemeteries, Rogers and Evans occupy a site that feels intentionally out of the way, aligning final rest with the landscape that framed their later lives. Nathaniel Coles, known as Nat King Cole, and Maria Cole, born Maria Hawkins, shared a marriage rooted in music, family, and measured public presence. Cole's early career with the trio established a standard for jazz piano and ensemble clarity, while his solo work carried him into popular recording and television. Maria, a vocalist with band experience, brought professional understanding to a household that balanced performance schedules with family routines. The couple navigated the demands of touring and studio work while maintaining a home life that valued education, faith, and community ties. Cole's contributions spanned musical innovation and visibility in national media. His phrasing and tone shaped a generation of vocal performance, and his television program marked an important step in network representation, even as sponsorship barriers limited its duration. Maria supported charitable and cultural initiatives and remained active in music circles, mentoring younger artists and advocating for disciplined craft. Together, They sustained philanthropic commitments that linked artistic success to civic responsibility and local institutions. Cole's health declined rapidly in the mid-1960s after a cancer diagnosis, which led to a short period of treatment and a widely reported passing that drew national mourning. Maria managed communications with care, balancing public tribute and family privacy. In later years, she continued to steward the legacy, coordinating reissues, memorial appearances, and institutional relationships that preserved recordings and documents. Maria died in the early 2010s, closing a chapter that had extended the couple's public impact through education and preservation. Both are interred at Forest Lawn Glendale, within interior mausoleum areas that operate under defined rules and limited photography. The cemetery presents open lawns and chapels, yet many notable figures rest behind doors and along controlled corridors. Visitors reach these interior spaces during posted hours or under staff oversight, and wayfinding remains restrained to preserve decorum. The setting keeps the experience orderly, quiet, and largely insulated from casual tourism, despite the site's prominence in cultural history. Their placement underscores how institutional design can render famous names effectively hidden in plain sight. The mausoleum interiors separate memorialization from open park pathways, guiding visitors through measured routes and subdued lighting. Markers emphasize names and dates without theatrical display, aligning remembrance with the couple's cultivated public demeanor. In a park known for celebrity associations, the Coles rest in a space that privileges respect and control, offering a focused, archival atmosphere that suits a legacy built on musical precision and professional discipline. William Clark Gable and Jane Alice Peters, known as Carole Lombard, formed a marriage that united two established film careers at the height of classic Hollywood. Gable's path from stage to screen shaped a persona associated with authority and ease, while Lombard developed a reputation for sharp timing and a modern approach to comedy. Their relationship grew from studio circles and professional collaborations, transitioning into marriage during a period of sustained box office prominence. Friends and colleagues described a household that balanced the pressures of public visibility with routines that emphasized work discipline and close companionship. Lombard's public contributions included a deft command of screwball rhythms and a willingness to experiment with tone, which kept her work fresh across the late 1930s. Gable's roles anchored major productions that defined the studio era's narrative scale. During the early war period, Lombard organized and attended defense-related events, reinforcing an image of civic engagement. The couple's cultural impact rested on the combination of star power and a practical, unadorned approach to work that grounded their public profiles in consistent performance rather than notoriety. Tragedy arrived in early 1942 when Lombard died following a wartime Bond tour flight, an event that produced widespread mourning in the industry and beyond. Gable entered military service later that year, participating in training and aerial photography work that connected his public profile to national service. After the war, he returned to film with steady output, though the pace shifted with age and changing industry rhythms. Gable died in the late 1950s after a sudden health event near the end of a production schedule, concluding a career that had spanned the transition from early sound to post-war formats. Both are interred at Forest Lawn Glendale, within or adjacent to the Great Mausoleum Complex, a set of interior spaces known for restricted access and carefully maintained decorum. The Great Mausoleum is characterized by controlled entries, limited photography, and guided or staff-mediated visitation, which reduces casual foot traffic and protects the environment. Lombard's placement within the interior and Gable's nearby entombment create a paired memorial experience that is nonetheless difficult for most visitors to approach directly. Wayfinding is minimal, and staff monitor movement in corridors that function as quiet chapels rather than open galleries. This arrangement makes the couple's resting place atypically inaccessible relative to their fame. The interiors rely on subdued lighting, polished stone, and restrained inscriptions, producing a contemplative atmosphere that prioritizes privacy and preservation. The mausoleum's policies reflect institutional stewardship of art, architecture, and memorials, aligning remembrance with regulated access. For viewers familiar with their public reach, the experience is defined by distance, a reminder that some of Hollywood's most visible figures rest within spaces designed for protection and quiet, not for open tour-style visitation. Spencer Bonaventure, Tracy, and Louise Tenney Treadwell. Tracy sustained a long marriage that balanced family duty with demanding professional lives. Tracy's path from stage to film established a reputation for rigor and restraint, a style that shaped mid-century screen acting. Louise, trained in theater, redirected her energy toward advocacy and education after the couple's son was diagnosed with a hearing impairment in early childhood. Their family life centered on stability, schooling, and carefully managed publicity, with schedules arranged to protect private routines amid studio commitments. Tracy's public contributions included a sequence of acclaimed performances that defined character-driven drama across the studio era. His collaborations with leading directors and peers set standards for naturalistic dialogue and controlled emotion. Off-screen, Louise founded and led the John Tracy Clinic, later the John Tracy Center, in Los Angeles, which provided education and support for deaf and hard of hearing children and their families. The institution's practical curriculum, parent guidance, and teacher training programs reflected her methodical approach, turning personal experience into sustained public service. Tracy's health grew fragile in the 1960s, with recurring illness that limited work and required breaks between projects. A final role reunited him with longtime collaborators, and he died in the late 1960s, shortly after completing production. Louise continued leadership and fundraising for the clinic, advocating for early intervention and family-centered instruction. She died in the early 1980s, leaving an institutional legacy that preserved the practices she had refined over decades. Public statements emphasized gratitude to staff, families, and donors who carried the work forward. Both are interred at Forest Lawn, Glendale, within interior mausoleum settings consistent with the cemetery's emphasis on decorum and controlled access. The grounds present open lawns and chapels, yet many notable interments, including the Tracys, lie behind doors where photography is limited and staff presence guides movement. Corridors and alcoves function as quiet, chapel-like spaces rather than exhibition halls, and wayfinding remains understated. Visitors encounter polished stone, measured lighting, and concise inscriptions that align with the cemetery's archival character. The interior placement creates a calm, memorial environment that mirrors the Tracys' public image, disciplined, private, and focused on craft and service. For researchers and admirers, the experience is defined by respect for institutional rules and by the recognition that some of Hollywood's most influential figures rest within spaces set apart from casual tourism. In this setting, remembrance connects performance history to a concrete legacy in education, with the mausoleum's restrained architecture underscoring the couple's steady, purpose-driven lives. Gerald Isaac Stiller and Ann Mira built a marriage and creative partnership that moved from improvisational stages to television and film, anchored by steady collaboration and family life. Both emerged from New York theater and Second City influence circles, translating sketch instincts into character-driven comedy. Their duo, Stiller and Miara, became a familiar presence on variety programs, while each pursued individual roles that extended from sitcoms to dramatic parts. The couple raised 2 children within a working household that balanced auditions, writing, and performance with routines shaped by neighborhood life. Public contributions included a durable comic voice that adapted to changing media without losing the rhythm of dialogue crafted for live audiences. Miara's work ranged from theater to television, writing and acting, often centering on pragmatic, sharply observed characters. Stiller developed a distinctive cadence that grounded supporting roles with precise timing, later reaching new audiences through recurring television performances. Together, they appeared on stage and in short-form pieces that showcased a collaborative method learned in clubs and rehearsal rooms rather than in large studio systems. Decline came gradually, marked by age-related health concerns that reduced travel and concentrated work closer to home. Miara died in the mid-2010s, with family statements emphasizing her writing, stage work, and mentorship of younger performers. Stiller continued select appearances and voice work, supported by family before his death several years later. Announcements were concise and respectful, echoing decades of professional discipline and the family's preference for privacy around medical details and memorials. Both are buried at Locust Valley Cemetery in Nassau County, New York, a suburban garden cemetery characterized by winding lanes, mature trees, and modest headstones. The setting lies away from tourist circuits, and the cemetery's administration enforces decorum that limits large gatherings and discourages intrusive photography. Their markers are restrained, consistent with the cemetery's understated aesthetic and the couple's long-standing New York sensibility. tranquility. Visitors encounter a quiet landscape that prioritizes reflection over spectacle, with minimal signage beyond section markers and maps. This placement aligns with a career built in rehearsal spaces, neighborhood theaters, and television studios rather than in celebrity mausoleums. The low-profile site keeps attention on the work that remains in recordings and scripts, while the cemetery's suburban character mirrors the couple's practical approach to family and craft. For those who seek the graves, the experience is calm and local in tone, reinforcing how a landmark comedy duo can rest within a setting defined by community norms and measured remembrance rather than by curated fame.